So what is so unique about this Flint scene? That era
The
in
people.
Yeah.
I mean, really, when you get down to it, I mean, it's just like, you know, the planets all lined up. You know, we had people like, you know, Doug Earp doing his thing, Joel doing the shows, Ben and Jim doing the radio show. Just everything just fell into place. I don't know how else to explain it, but without those people, you could have taken any one of them out of the equation, and it would have been a lot less than the sum of the parts.
The thing that's struck me is you know, I'm still in touch a little bit with people who were part of the Grand Rapids and Lansing and Detroit and Kalamazoo scenes at the time. And the people in Flint genuinely liked each other. You know, some of these other scenes, like there were bands that just would not get on stage with other bands, and they just actively like hated each other, and the scenes got all sort of bifurcated, and then there were all these subdivisions, and if you didn't have the right leather jacket or you didn't have the right hairstyle, you couldn't play a show with another band. And Flint, you know, when I started going to shows, I mean, that first show I went to, you know, was you know, Tempter on the bill, you know, and you could see a show that had Dissonance, The Guilty Bystanders, and Political Silence on the same bill. It doesn't get any more diverse in terms of like those were these three big subdivisions of 80s music, and they were all playing together, they're all friends, members of bands would swap out, they all knew the same people, and I don't know, part of it was because Flint was too small to split up. You know, when you get to a city, you know, Detroit was, you know, metro area is 10 times as big. So you could have 10 separate scenes all the size of Flint. In Flint, you split the scene up, you don't have enough bands to play a show.
Right. Well, everybody needed everybody else, you know? It's like, you're not gonna put on a show with one band, you know?
Because no single band had enough PA equipment to run a show by themselves.
And there's just not, you know, there's not the ego ratio. It just, you know, with Flint, I mean, it's kind of like this sort of like self-deprecating, you know, you ain't shit, I ain't shit. This is shitty, but let's have some fun. You know what I mean? It's just.
I wonder if maybe, if you're in Detroit, you could have the illusion of maybe we could get signed, maybe we could tour, maybe we could be that band. And people in Flint just always had this like blue collar chip on their shoulder that being here right now, playing this show to whoever decides to pay their $3 or $5 and walk in the room is good enough for us. And because they felt it was, bands put their best effort forward night after
It's
night
like just
after
being
night.
in the moment and doing what you're doing when you're doing it, not having that finish line, you know.
Yeah. I remember a band came to the local a few years ago, and I mean, there were like 70, 80 kids there, and they decided it wasn't enough people to play. And they started unloading, and they made up some story about, you know, somebody's grandma was sick, and they put their gear back in their van and drove away. And I thought, you know, in the 80s in Flint, that'd be unimaginable.
I remember a show we played at
Empire One?
No, we were at Metropolis, and snowy. I mean, worse than any snow we've gotten this year. Just a blizzard. And get done playing at Metropolis, and I think you came down and said, "Oh, the guys down in the back room canceled out. They couldn't make it. You want to play?" And we logged everything downstairs, pushing amps and everything through the alley down to the next bar to play another show. You know.
And the best part is the opening band left before, you know, because of the snow, they left before they picked up the cover at the door, so we got everything. Well, one of the few times we actually made a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about like the Wyatt Earp or the Earp Fest, you know, kind of reunion shows, and you know, people have reunions all the time, but it's mostly because of like chance, like we all went to high school together at the same time.
Circumstances of birth or school.
Yeah, like,
or
but
work.
not, you know, the Flint scene was there by choice. Nobody had to be there. Nobody had to put in all that hard work practicing to be in a band. Nobody had to like get the stencils out and make a flyer like Gary did so many times. You know, so the fact that everybody wanted to be there, I think is really powerful. And, you know, it's just great to get on Facebook and get this like, you know, Facebook friend request out of the blue from somebody you haven't seen since an OLOL dance in 1986 or whatever it was, or somebody that played in some band. And I don't know what other people's lives are like, but when I look back at the good things in my life, if you take out family that most people have, You know, I have some travel stuff that's memorable to me, and I have some friends, you know, lots of friends that matter, but almost everything good in my life was related in some way to the shows. So it was the best times I had in my life, the best bands I ever saw, the music I still listen to. The woman I'm dating now, I originally met 10 years ago when she sang in a band at the shows. I'm still in Flint in large part because the shows, along with my parents, are what tied me here. I have my job I have now doing like economic development and entrepreneurship because the local, you know, the shows are sort of the first business I started. And you know, so when I look back at what's mattered in my life, it's been because of this scene and the people involved. And I think for a lot of people that, you know, married and kids and careers, or careers that have suddenly ended, or they've had ups and downs in their lives, but there was this common and unique thread of these shows that even is a lot narrower than the history of music. And for me it was, you know, the sort of golden years were like 84. Really, they sort of ended when we got to the Capitol, because then it felt like work. You know, we're doing shows every month, and then every weekend, and then every Friday and Saturday, but it was those 2 or 3 years, just the mystery and excitement of, you know, going to some weird hall, throwing it together, you know, it was like kids in the basement, let's put on a show, and jumping in the car and racing down to Detroit to see some band you'd heard of but had never actually heard before.
Right.
And you know, that was what made it all worthwhile.
It's hard to really, I mean, the older I get, you can't really separate the occurrences in your life that would or would not have happened if not for, you know what I mean, it's all so intertwined. And I mean, I came to the scene with, you know, eating, sleeping, and breathing music. And what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a rock star. I want to play drums. I want to do this. I want to do that. And it's always been music. And it, you know, I mean, this being so central to that, and as many bands as I've been in, as many bands as I'm still in, I mean, I can't separate myself from that.
Right.
I mean, it's just, as far as like, how does, you know, what is it, something in the water here, or as it relates to Flint, I think it's. And this, you know, I can only rely on, you know, my bandmates will chalk it up, you know, to, you know, them being outside and, you know, only having a peripheral impression of Flint and the people in it is like most of the things we have we really earn, you know, and it's like it's the same thing goes for, you know, this scene. It's like we earned this.
What's
And
the line from the Minutemen? Punk rock saved our lives.
Mhm.
You know, talking about being like small town kids.
this band
you
could
know,
be your life.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you know, for me, it's like, you know, my life and the scene, just like Fido was saying, you know, it's hard to separate the two. And I met my wife through the
Yeah,
shows and
yeah.
stuff, you know. So
Well, it's, yeah, you know, when John left the Guilties, you know, said he was done doing it, and I still had the Rats of Unusual Size that were taking up a bit of my time too, you know, and then Jim leaves. When those two bands quit, it was like I lost my identity. I'm like, I don't even know who the fuck I am anymore, you know? It's like without the bands, I didn't feel I was anything, you know? So that's, you know, just, you put all your importance on those kind of things, and, you know, I think that's probably what makes the scene, you know, everybody, that's what their life was the scene.
Right.
You know, and that's why everybody came back together. It was like having a family reunion after 15, 20 years, you know?
And like you say, you know, it's the family that we chose.
Right.
It wasn't just this sort of
Yeah.
arbitrary reunion.
Yeah, it wasn't an obligation. It was never an obligation. You know, it was something we all wanted to do, and something we all still want to do, you know?
Mhm.
I couldn't imagine not doing something, you know, musical or creative, you know, and it's great to have this to draw on and to have, you know, a scene to have come from where you're grounded in it, you know. It's- I mean, so I'm gonna be doing this in some form or another till I croak, you know, so
Yeah,
you know, might as well be with people you like.
that's
Yeah.
right. I think we lucked out in terms of the amount of people, of likable people that we've mixed it up with in the last couple of decades, it's just amazing.
And let's be honest, most of the assholes have moved away.
Yeah.
Yeah, or died.
I'm still here.
I
Any,
said most.
Yeah.
Any
Like
of
John
the,
said, doing something creative, I mean, John and Lee and I are still writing, recording, and I don't think we've played, what, four live performances maybe,
If that, yeah, probably four.
Just, the important thing is getting that, creating something,
We haven't
Whether-
even gotten
whether
out of
anyone-
Dave's
yeah.
basement,
Right,
we're still
right.
kicking ass.
Hey, it was just like, it was the same thing as when we started, we had no idea if anybody would ever wanna listen to the stuff.
Yeah.
And the stuff that Ice Hill is doing now, we don't know if anyone's even gonna hear it at any point.
Yeah, we're at
Yeah.
that same crossroads as at the very beginning, it's like,
It's
okay,
full
for like
circle.
acoustic rock, and like I said, I tell everybody, this is what punk sounds like when it gets old, Well, where do you go as an outlet for a live performance for that? Borders, people have open mic nights, but, I know a lot of stuff like that, if I went in and be like, well, I've heard one of their songs, I can leave now, type of thing, but, after all these years, we haven't learned anything as far as
No.
the business end of the music
No,
business.
we, even if somebody said, right now, this voice from heaven came down and said, anything you do creatively from this point on, nobody's gonna listen to it, nobody's gonna care, I'd still
That's
do it.
fine, yeah.
I'd still do it.
The part about Flint that's different is that, those scenes you just talked about were built around like spectating. It was, you'd go to Greenwich Village and watch what was going on. You'd go to CBGB's and, people talk about, I saw these amazing bands, and great, you saw the Ramones or you saw the Talking Heads, but I don't know how being a peripheral part of something internationally famous like that is somebody with a stamp on your hand in the crowd can possibly compare to being on stage anywhere else.
That's like saying, I remember watching the moon landing on TV. Well, there's people out there that say, I remember landing on the moon.
Right.
And, I went with one time with the Rats and out to New York, and they played CBGB's, and, knowing the history of that place, and it was cool because they asked me to come up and play a song with them, and it was great, but when people asked me, what was it like playing CBGB's, and I said, well, now it's like the punk rock equivalent of getting your picture taken in the Batmobile. 1966, picture in the Batmobile would be in the world. Now it's like, yeah, whatever, I did too,
Right, and the interesting thing about what you said about those scenes, the idea of spectating, and that was sort of a centralizing, people came to CBGB to get a part of the scene from all over the place. I mean, those bands, Television Blondie, Talking Head, those weren't all like Bowery bands, you know what I mean? Like, things, that was, kind of magnetic, and, Flint is obviously not a magnet, but
Really?
it works,
We drank Jim Forniatis here
It's
from
like,
New York.
well,
He was
yeah,
our only one.
there's
Yeah.
certain people
So it must
that,
be a big magnet.
some people that get it, and most people don't, and I think that we don't care either way. I mean, you dig it or don't, be a part of it or don't. We'll do it regardless. And
Nobody in Flint was ever told their band wasn't good enough or didn't draw enough people to play a show. And nobody ever felt like they didn't know enough about doing fanzines to put a fanzine out. Or if people really wanted to, they could find a way to get on the radio and be on a radio show, or show up somewhere with a big box of records and call themselves a DJ. And so it's that participatory aspect that I thought was great. And, people were
everybody
talking-
had their place in the scene.
Yeah, and people said, well, how did you like hire staff people for the shows? And, like Chris was over there smirking in the corner because I think, it was one of those usual like mine or something on fire at the show, and here's some guy I just saw walking around, and I handed him a big wad of money and a hand stamp and said, here, could you work the door?
Yeah.
20 plus years later, he's still helping out, because
Yeah.
it was one of those kinds of scenes, and that's
Nobody said no.
right.
Basically was that's what it boiled down to. I mean, there's a lot of times where somebody could have said, you suck, get the hell out of here, or, you know, you're not good enough to do this, but everybody said yes, you know, it's like it was all positive.
Well, the only person I remember walking with was, you remember Rose that used to work the door at all the shows, she and her boyfriend?
Oh, okay.
Were they the ones that had the farm, where they did some shows? Anyway, they worked the door at all the shows, and they had this like beat up old cash box covered with, you know, miscut beef stickers and stamps. And I remember they came into one of my shows, and were holding it, and I was like, oh, awesome, are you gonna help out at the door? Because, you know, they were a little older than me, I didn't know them that well, they were more with the Dissonance crowd. And she said, no, I am officially turning over this cash box to you. I am so sick of these goddamn kids, I am never doing this again. So I was suitably honored, but, you know, like, that was their version of quitting the band, I guess. They put in their time,
Yeah.
so.
But I came back. I
Yeah.
couldn't live without it.
So, and aside from us talking about ourselves, you know, the amazing thing for me is that I feel like I have a pretty good memory, and the shows are important to me, and I have like these boxes of crap, but it sure looks more impressive on TakeNoPrisoners.info, like seeing this collection and being reminded of really the full breadth of this, you know, and just sitting here today going through this stuff, I'm seeing flyers for shows I never went to, even at the time I thought I never missed a show, and getting issues of fanzines that, you know, there might have only been 20 copies of, you know, before their dad kicked them out of their office where they were, you know,
Yeah.
Xeroxing and stapling.
Right.
And I think what was going on then was intrinsically valuable, but the fact that Aaron's figured out a way to sort of to organize and collect this online
Yeah.
is going to take the value that all the people attending were able to get out of it and multiply that forever after.
Completely.
You know, John's
Completely.
kids are at the point now where they're probably getting to where they could appreciate their old man's in a band, and Gary's kids will be soon behind, and, you know, but like, they can watch that video and see those flyers, and people are perpetually interested in, you know, well, what bigger bands did you open for, and what was it like seeing Slayer, you know, in a room that only held 200 people, and those are the sort of cool stories that the website, for me, has
Right.
sparked. And,
Yeah.
you know, sort of tied in with the ERPFest reunion idea is that, you know, instead of these, you know, decrepit old aging punk rockers, you know, sitting around in a bar telling stories, you know, getting them written down so they're preserved and everybody can sort of have access.
Well,
to
yeah,
them.
now the stories, you know, there can be fewer gaps and they can be more credible. I mean, I remember meeting up before the first ERPFest, and Brett handed me a flyer, you know, like, if you have any of these tapes, and going through this list, and like, I found more than one band that I was in that made 40 minutes of cassette crap that I forgot even existed. I'm like, who told you? You know, and it's like, and on, it's like, wow, you know, having that, like you said, your memory is reasonably good, and mine isn't.
We'll go on the
And it's just-
website.
Yeah.
Remember, I
But
was
on the
straight
website,
edge
I never
most of this
thought,
time.
the hemlock therapy stuff, that was a guy that, I used to hang out with Kirk Castor, played drums, I played guitar and that stuff, and we asked some guy to come in and sing for us. And that is actually one of our practice tapes. He took off with it, took it and started selling it at Herbs. That's the first song I ever wrote, Julie Newmar's Tale is on there. And I never thought I'd ever hear it again, you know? Because he had the only practice tape and it went out, I never bought one.
Yeah.
Till somebody at one point was telling me, I think John was telling me about this tape you got at Herbs and started talking about it, and I'm like, that sounds familiar, you know? And
Yeah.
realized it was,
That's really a trip.
yeah.
Well, I borrowed some photos that Ty took of the Crucifix for a fanzine I did in like '87, and just got the pictures back to him today.
Jeez.
And I think, you know, another good thing about the website is that it's, you know, got me motivated to write things down, because I mean, those old memories I was writing down, you know, I kind of had that sitting in a book, you know, gathering dust. It's like, you know, maybe I should, you know, get that out and work on that some more. So whatever I do from this point on is going to be because of the website, because I figure, you know, somebody might actually for some reason wanna see it.
Yeah,
so.
I can't remember the first show I ever played with the Guilties. I barely remember the last
Well,
show.
and
I played.
we were talking a little bit earlier, is that if you're in a band now, you know, somebody in your band or their parents have a decent camera, video camera. They're at all of your shows recording it. All of the flyers are done online and they're JPEGs.
Right.
So every single flyer is in a folder and is kept. Every bit of music you've ever made is an MP3. Like bands now are gonna be like 100% documented. And everybody's got, you know, cell phones that take pictures and they'll have all these candid shots. And so, you know, that's great, but it almost makes it worthless because there's so much you can't
Right,
point
it's
out.
like an overload.
But with this website, it's, you know, gleaning all these little bits and pieces that everybody's got. And I think, you know, like literally up until this morning, if Ty Schick's house had burned down, you know, this priceless record of these shows and these photos that he took would have disappeared. And if my house burned down, you know, a lot of the flyers I have, or fanzines, are probably the only copy left. And the minute this stuff is digitized and goes online, people
It's
can
there
download
forever.
it, they can copy it, it's there forever.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the archive can only grow. More and more people will be adding those stories, you know, we'll get in touch with more folks, right? And the best thing the site has done for me, aside from the, like, wasting many, many hours of valuable work time, is, you know, the music in my collection. It's a pain in the butt to pull out an LP and make sure, you know, your record player is working, those of us that still have them. And it got to the point where I was scared to play any of those cassettes because you knew every time you played it might be the time it snapped and wrapped
Yeah.
itself around the
Yeah.
reel.
Yeah.
And so I had all this music that had meant so much to me that I didn't even want to play anymore. And just having in the digital format means, you know, you just throw a CD in and you pull together a comp and, you know, you get all that all over again. And, you know, I was never a big collector nerd, but I like the idea of the Wyatt Earp stuff and, you know, some cool packaging and the kind of stuff you can't get online. But at the same time, you know, with this growing, you know, inexhaustible supply of old music, the vast majority of which was never released at all, or if it was 50 copies on cassette. You know, they got sold at a couple of shows and at Wyatt Earp and then disappeared. And, you know, just being able to like point people at that music is,
We thought about it, putting out a 35 disc box set.
Well, and I was telling you earlier, Joel, that like, it's almost like a compulsion to like, you know, do a show, record the show, get it on tape, and the sick thing is, like, I haven't gone back, you know, I don't have the time to go back and get into it and, you know, codify it and find out, separate the wheat from the chaff and all this. So I'm probably gonna be laying stuff on you that literally it's never been listened to, it's only been recorded, and, you know, I'm gonna have to sit down and actually, you know, go through some stuff, but it's a weird compulsion. It's like I can't really tell you why I saved it, but it's,
well, if that's the case, it's one of your least weird
you know,
compulsions.
it's the one that will keep me, you know, it will never land me in jail.
Well, sort of on that note, my last comment is, you know, in getting together the material that we want to digitize and get up on the website, it's also gotten Chris and I into organizing all of this. So boxes of fanzines in alphabetical order, you know, Michigan fanzines, articles about Michigan bands, all the flyers, set lists, promotional material, and my goal is, you know, in the next few months, get all this organized to the point that I can take it over to Sloan Museum and start dropping off these boxes of material, and they can start building the physical archive that will be the counterpoint to takenoprisoners.info, so that, you know, for 99.9% of the people that care about this stuff, the MP3 files will be plenty. But maybe you do need those liner notes on the inside of the cassette cover, or want to hold the actual fanzine. And I love the idea, number one, that it won't be in my storage room at my house, where I have to, you know, worry about it getting damaged, or I could have a roof leak or whatever, but that it'll be at Sloan Museum long after I'm gone, And like TakeNoPrisoners.info started small and has grown. Hopefully, what other people, you know, I saw a friend of mine who lives out of town who said, yeah, I got a box in my bottom of my closet, I'll send it back. You know, take it over to Sloan, integrate it into their collection, and then eventually they'll have this really amazing collection of mid-Michigan music. And sometime down the road, you know, they can do a display. If some, you know, John's grandkid is you know, doing a paper for class about, you know, the history of the guilty bystanders, that'll be the source material. And so, you know, obviously we're encouraging people, if you have cool stuff, scan your photos and post them and let everybody know who's in there, or ask if you don't know, and get the music on there. But also think about like when you're not going to get any more enjoyment out of the stacks of fanzines, you know, let's get them over to Jeff Taylor at Sloan Museum, get them cataloged, get them in boxes where everybody can have access and
Right.
use those if they want.
At some point, the physical ephemera will be important to somebody more than we could, you know, ever imagine that it would be when we
When
made
the
it.
apes take over the planet.
Yeah.
I mean, just the fact that we're doing this interview now, 25 years after we
Yeah.
started, is something I never would have imagined.
I'm just happy to be alive.
Yeah.